It's the American icon that started out as an underwhelming little copycat that morphed into one of the most famous cars in the history of pop culture. Doesn't matter if it's on TV or on the big screen, it is an icon. It's the Dodge Charger. Okay, picture this. You're an automotive development executive at one of the big three, and Ford has just launched the Mustang as the world's first pony car. And you're going, damn, why didn't we think of that? So you immediately start developing a pony car of your own, and this is what actually happened in 1964 when the Mustang did come out. Chevrolet made the Camaro, AMC made the Marlin, and Dodge made the Charger. But the 1965 prototype got a mixed reception, so the first gen was basically just a tweaked Dodge Coronet, if I'm honest. It had slightly different styling, about the same engines, and a Coronet chassis, so it really wasn't that different. But it was 10% more expensive, so there's that. Literally the only good thing it had was the optional 426 Hemi, making 425 horsepower. But for the first generation, less than 60,000 were sold. For comparison's sake, Ford sold over 1 million Mustangs in that time frame. They definitely had some catching up to do, so they initiated a new styling philosophy. Not based on the Coronet or any of that stuff. They called it the Coke bottle. Gone was a fastback in favor of some super sweet flying buttresses, and critically, a new performance package called the RT, which stands for Road Track. Not Road and Track, that's copyright. Road/Track. You can have racing stripes. You can have them on the house, if you so choose. Frankly, I think the Charger looks a lot better without the racing stripes. That might be the only car in history where I said that is true, but there we go. It also came with a 426 cubic inch Hemi, making 425 horsepower. You're saying, well, darn, that sounds eerily similar to the Corvette and the Camaro and the Boss Mustang and the previous generation. You're thinking, oh, right, that's because of the insurance and tax brackets for the American auto industry. Actual power figures are estimated to be in excess of 550 horsepower. That's a lot of power in the 1960s. And it worked a bit to get people in the showrooms, but not as much as its pop culture icon. This thing was used, when it first came out anyway, in both Bullitt as the baddie chase car that Steve McQueen had to chase down, and most famously of all, Dukes of Hazzard. In fact, the Dukes of Hazzard TV show, with their massive jumps that were not CGI, destroyed an estimated 250 Chargers during its season run. That's a lot of destroyed precious muscle cars. In fact, they were running out of Chargers so quickly, they actually had to use helicopters to scout for Chargers on the freeway because they drove so many into bent chassis, broken suspension, collapsed wheels. They effed those Chargers up. But the massive media buzz did work in selling over 200,000 cars in this generation alone, making it one of the most popular Chargers by far. And while they were winning in the showrooms, the same cannot be said for America's best pastime. No, not baseball. NASCAR. The Charger's actually been competing in the NASCAR Grand National Championship since the first generation, but the aerodynamics from the body styles meant that the back end would step out at high speed, which is a problem on oval racing at 160 miles an hour. Drivers were actually compared to as driving on ice. So in order to add traction, the first generation was homologated with a rear spoiler to increase downforce and therefore traction, making it the first American car to ever come with a spoiler from the factory, apparently. And it did good. It won them the 1966 title. But pretty soon other manufacturers took notice of the spoiler idea and began incorporating it. So in order to continue on the competition, they made the Charger 500 for the second generation. This had a bit more in the aerodynamic department in terms of subtle body modifications, but it didn't work. So, they had to think more radically. They teamed up with John Pointer from Chrysler's Nuclear Missile Division. Yeah, that was a thing. And he decided the key was aerodynamics. So he put a massive nose cone on, which lengthened the car by 18 inches. And then he put that now famous, if not comical, massive rear wing on the back, which was put way high up to stay in the clean air rather than that dirty slipstream air, giving it more downforce. In fact, the front nose cone and the rear wing gave the Charger a ton of downforce, near enough. That's a lot of downforce. At a time where aerodynamics was just being used in Formula 1 and the Americans were using it in NASCAR. In your face, Europe. And thanks to that massive Hemi V8, the Daytona could hit 204 miles an hour, making it the first NASCAR to hit the 200 mile per hour barrier, setting a record that would stand for 13 years. It dominated the 1969 and 1970 seasons before being permanently banned for safety reasons. Because the cars were too fast. And although they were made in limited quantities, because remember, NASCARs actually had to be stock cars legitimately. They had to have homologation versions. So they did actually make road versions of these monsters. But, the 1960s personas thought that the Charger Daytona and its cousin, the Plymouth Superbird, were ugly. Just let that sink in for a second. They thought these beautiful winged beasts were ugly, and they didn't sell any of them. Nowadays, they go for about $250,000 at auction, but back in the 60s, you couldn't get anyone to buy them at all. And then there was the third generation. You see, this grew up at a dark time in America, the 1970s. It also had a new fuselage body style, which was, okay, a bit of a step backwards in terms of styling from the second gen, but it was fitted with the same engines, which means that over 120,000 of the things were sold. But the third gen and fourth gen Chargers were hit brutally hard by the gas crisis, and it was discontinued completely in 1978. And the Charger would never be seen again until 1982, and you still wouldn't really see it because it was a 70 horsepower, 4-cylinder, front-wheel drive car based on the Chrysler Turismo. Because small economical cars were all the rage these days. So they just slapped the Charger badge on in 1982 and said, "It's a Charger, guys! It's a hatchback front-wheel drive, but it's a Charger. Trust me." However, leave it to the good old boy of Carroll Shelby to make the Charger a bit faster. He was already tuning the hatchback, the Omni, into a fantastic little hatchback, one of the fastest in the world at the time. And he put that 175 horsepower turbocharged 4-cylinder into the Charger. He called it the GLHS. Now, normally these weird acronyms in German cars mean, Motorsport Division or all-wheel drive or, engine code. GLHS literally means, and this is a direct translation, goes like hell, some more. Yes, that is not a joke. That is the actual name, and I think that might be one of my favorite names for a car of all time. The 4-cylinder Dodge Shelby twins were some of the fastest cars in America at the time, but they were made in limited quantities and they were discontinued in 1987. We would have to go, God, almost 30 years for the next generation Charger, because while they did have a brief concept car in 1999, it didn't really go anywhere until 2006 came along, and Dodge was unveiling a new four-door sedan, and they slapped a Charger badge on it, which you may think, God, that's sacrilege, looking at you, Dodge Dart 2. However, this was no ordinary four-door sedan because it had the usual 3.5-liter V6 or the massive 6.1-liter Hemi making 425 horsepower to the rear wheels. The RT package came back as well, along with a brand new one, the SRT8, tuned by, guess who, SRT, Street Racing Technology Division. Had more aggressive styling, Brembo brakes. The 0 to 60 was in the sub 5 second range. This thing was quick. And not only was it a quick car, it looked pretty good for a four-door sedan, and it was a police car. Just in case you ever wanted to escape the police, they gave it all-wheel drive and a 370 horsepower Hemi. So good luck trying to escape that thing. The 7th gen came out in 2011, which completely gave it new styling. Retro styling was back with the revised tail lights stretching across the whole back end, just like the 2nd gen. And the engines got a bit more extreme, shall we say. They were a bit, 5.7-liter Hemi came back, the 6.4-liter Hemi, the usual stuff, and the ridiculous 707 horsepower supercharged Hellcat engine. This thing had a top speed of 200 miles an hour, and was one of the fastest four-door sedans on Earth. So naturally, they made it a little faster. The 2021 Hellcat Red Eye was the top of the super sedan food chain. Had a massive wide body kit from the factory to fit massiver 305 tires, and racing suspension, and 6-piston Brembo brakes, stiffened anti-roll bars, and the Hellcat engine now makes 707 foot-pounds of torque. Oh, and 800 horsepower. It does 203 miles an hour and does a quarter mile in 11 seconds flat. The Charger may have grown a few more doors in its gap between generations, but whether it be a front-wheel drive four-cylinder that can embarrass a Corvette, or a two-door muscle car that can blow the doors off a classic Ferrari, or a modern performance super sedan that can rival even the best from Audi, the Charger can do pretty much anything it wants. And it has done that for the last 60 years.